strategy group meeting, real. I just want to say on the presentation, on your agenda tonight, is a presentation of the Sunflower Centre. That will now take place at the November meeting, and that will kick off at 5:45 in the chamber before the strategy group in November. So you will get the agenda out to that meeting, and obviously beyond that agenda. We deferred it from this meeting because of that previous item we just had, so that's why it's been deferred for a month. Are you happy, strategy group members, for the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of September to be signed off as a correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you. Apologies for absence.
Steve Osborne.
Steve Osborne, no apologies. No, thank you. Declarations of members' interests. Declare them now on the item on the agenda when it's actually being discussed. Are there any declarations now? No, thank you. So we come on to our first substantive item on this agenda: housing and environmental health issues. Updates to housing-related policies. Councillor Auger.
Thank you, Chair. Housing is an increasingly important part of the Council's work. This flows from an overall demand for housing and also from major changes made to the Council's duties towards people who are or are at risk of being homeless, introduced by the Homelessness Reduction Act of 2017. In this context, the Council has needed to respond practically to these issues using the tools at its disposal. This need continues, and as such, it is appropriate to revisit certain policies to ensure they work as effectively as possible. And you'll see there are three appendices, and I intend to go through them one by one to seek your recommendation to take this to full council. There will be an amendment, a couple of amendments, so if you just bear with me as I get through them. And
Councillor, you want to take one at a time on the vote?
yeah, what I thought about doing is take one at a time for maybe for debate, and then at the end for the final vote. Would that be?
That'd be fine. It's your choice, Joe.
Okay, yeah. We'll take one for debate, and then we'll put them to bed, and then we'll move on to the next
Yes.
one. So, okay. So the first one is Appendix A. What you have there is some amendments extracted from the Housing Assistance Policy, which is on the website. So the provision of housing assistance policy forms a package of developed to support vulnerable people and maintain and adapt or improve to maintain and adapt and improve their homes. So following a review, there are a number of recommendations here. A lot of them are just with regard to some factual changes, some rewording. A lot of it is under the data protection and information sharing, so GDPR. And they will be, if agreed, inserted into the mother policy, which obviously will be updated accordingly. So I'll take any questions, and I've got Simon here that could do any technical stuff that I can't answer.
Thank you, Councillor. Does there any questions or comments? Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've read all through this policy and the amendments, and I've got to say that I'm not happy with some of the amendments to keep at bay. Obviously, Bromford Housing used to provide a free floating support. Obviously, it no longer has the funding, so that's been stripped away, obviously, through no fault of their own. There was the mortgage rescue scheme that would help people in difficulty, prevent them going to homelessness. That's been stripped away. But I was surprised actually it's got school visits about educating people. I didn't even know that we did that, and I wasn't aware that we went into schools to speak about that, but I thought that would be something that would be quite useful. And then there was something else. It was to help with the bond if people are going into private rental, if they don't get on the housing allocation scheme. So that was very, I was very disappointed to read all those, because I thought that all of those prevent people from becoming homeless. And the other thing that I was very surprised about was down in the foyer, there are some houses this week on the housing options scheme that are owned by Futures, and they are on the new build over on Monksmoor. I was at the planning meeting last night, and there was another application for those on Middlemore, and I heard many people saying that they welcome social housing, and I thought, yes, so do I, until I saw those ones downstairs on the board. Futures, Monksmoor, 2-bed, £750 a month. another 2-bed, same price, a 3-bed, £800 a month, and the other 3-bed, £825 a month. Now, that is on our housing option scheme. How is that social housing affordable? And I'm sure, and Councillor Walker, I'm sure, were you aware that that is a private rent? I've gone through today, I've gone through all the houses that are actually up for private rental, and a lot of those come in cheaper than what we've got on the housing allocation scheme downstairs. Now, the other thing that concerns me is once we go to universal credit, my understanding there is a cap on how much can help people with housing. Now, this is way, way above what the cap level is, I'm sure. So I don't know how we are actually helping people. So I wonder if you could answer any of those questions.
Okay,
We'll come back to Councillor in a minute.
So to me, with all that you're saying that we're trying to prevent, I can't see where we're trying to prevent.
Thank you, Councillor Randall. I've got another speaker, Councillor Powell. Councillor Gilpin.
Okay, I'm slightly confused because I thought we were taking these in appendix
Yeah,
order,
we're talking about
and we're
item
dealing-
1.
So we're only talking about item 1,
Right.
and Councillor Walker will present the item that Councillor Randall's talking about in a moment.
Speak,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I am just talking on appendix 1.
Yes.
I'm very pleased with this policy that the council has had throughout the years. I have known many families that have benefited from this policy. I know many families that have been able to stay in their own accommodation because of this policy, and I'm glad to see that we've reviewed it and that I support the amendments that are being made.
Thank you, Steve. So we're talking about appendix, we're talking about recommendation 1 here. And Councillor Organ, come back to the points. Councillor
Yeah,
Randall.
I would like to have some of those more detailed
We're not,
issues.
on the points that Councillor Randall raised related to number 2.
Yeah, next appendix.
That's amendment. It's not appendix 8.
Sorry.
Chairman, if I
Sorry,
might, I
just-
think it might be
yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, the points Councillor Randall made are Appendix B,
Yes.
and therefore we'll come to them.
That's what someone said, yeah.
Okay.
It's probably also helpful to say that the detail that was quoted about what's quoted on housing options as of this morning, whatever it was, I think Maria was probably best placed to deal with that outside of this meeting, because clearly we can't sort of almost
It's a public meeting, yeah.
individual cases
Yeah.
without finding out precisely what being referred to.
Thank you. Okay, recommendation 1 then.
Yeah, but just with regard to those 2 general points about universal credit and affordable housing,
Yes.
I'm quite happy to meet with Councillor Randall, and I think she knows the type of person I have to sit down and to talk about those issues. I do sit on a number of things with regard to affordable housing, and if we're not getting it right strategically and remember Futures is a private company, but you and me can sit down and you can go through those in detail, and I can present them to some of the RPs with regard to your concerns and worries. So that is an open invitation for you to spend some time in a little bit more detail. So I'll expect an email from you and we can tie up together. And universal credit again is not really a matter for this meeting. So.
Thank you, Councillor. That's very kind of you, Councillor Randall, so we should take some. That would be very good.
Okay, good.
Thank you. So on recommendation 1, are you happy to agree it?
Yeah.
That's committee members, I'm sorry. Yeah. Over to you, Councillor Walker.
Okay, so with regard to Appendix B, which will be where Simon will come in on those more detailed ones, the strategic housing plan, this is actually a page lift, and this will be a single page insertion with regard to the update. A lot of it is again factual accuracy, but Councillor Randall has raised a few concerns with regard to some of the specific withdrawal of certain funds, etc. But the strategic housing plan provides a brief description on the preventative measures used in order to assist those threatened with homelessness to achieve positive outcomes. The policy covers the period from 2014 to 19 and is currently being reviewed. However, due to some information contained within this document has been identified as being out of date, so some small changes have been identified as necessary, and that will be your Appendix B.
Thank you indeed. Any comments on that? Can we move to the vote on number 2? Recommendation 2, do you support that? You want to speak, Councillor Howard?
No.
No. Who supports recommendation 2?
Agreed.
Good, okay, thank you. And now on to item 3.
Okay, item 3 is the homelessness prevention scheme. Now this is a new document, a new policy that's been written. It provides financial assistance in the form of interest-free loans to assist the homeless or those who are threatened with homelessness, with the aim of preventing and relieving homelessness. Okay, so there's a couple of amendments I'd just like to add on this one. Is if we go to paragraph 4.1, which is on page 22 of the package, eligibility. I'd like to propose a slight change to this. This covers the cases of people fleeing domestic violence or serving in the armed forces under the Armed Forces Covenant. The Council has a duty towards people suffering domestic violence, even if they are not linked to the district. And I believe it's right, bearing in mind the military covenant, to ensure that we also assist those people in the armed forces that have served our country. So what I'd like to do is the additional wording to be part of bullet point 4 is to say, except in cases relating to domestic violence or to members of the armed forces. So that will be added in with regard to point 4.
Point 4 of the payment.
So,
Is that page 5?
so eligibility, point 4, sorry,
Page
4.1, point 4.
Is that page 22?
22.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
So what it would read is the first bit would be accepting cases relating to domestic violence or to members of the armed forces having a current location connected to the Daventry district, specifically having a living and working in the district. So it allows people in domestic violence and armed forces to be considered, even though they do not specifically live and work in the district.
I get that. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Gilbert.
I'd just like to ask a question, please, because homelessness and health are very much related.
Yes.
And homelessness is often a consequence of health, and I'm talking more specifically here, vulnerable people and mental disabilities. But I want to know how it links up with the fact that as a health service within the county now, we are having to bus people out of the county, and while they're out of the county and in hospitals out of the county, etc., they can, as a consequence, become homeless, and so then their link with the county is broken. It's just a question here. What happens there? Are they no longer allowed to apply within Daventry district?
Thanks, Councillor Gilbert. Maria?
An applicant wouldn't lose their local connection criteria in the circumstances you've described.
They wouldn't. Okay.
Okay, that's good.
It was
Good
just
point.
a question.
Good point of clarity. Are there any other points or questions? Yes, Councillor Morgan.
Chair, thank you. Forgive the perhaps slight trivial nature of this one, but the recommendation, the third one, says the Homelessness Prevention Scheme 2018 policy.
Yes.
The document actually isn't called that, it doesn't have the number 2018. It's only very subtle. And actually, I also wanted to raise the point on page 25 of the papers,
Yes.
so page 9 of the document itself. 7.4, second sentence begins, in such instance, a fresh assessment. I think the word is open to perhaps misinterpretation or...
Did you suggest no word?
Well, actually, I can't. I mean, when I read it,
Yeah.
the actual word I thought was new, but I'm not even sure if that's the right word either.
Right.
But perhaps I'll just put that open to Councillor
Thank
and Simon, see if they had a better word, which may be less open to interpretation.
Revise?
No.
To be honest, I like fresh, but I think I don't know what happened to be misinterpreted.
Well, I think fresh is almost a bit, it's abused.
Well, it's
I mean,
casual.
this week with Pret a Manger, we saw the word fresh abused perhaps in terms of bread. But I think it's got the wrong connotations, I think. What's it mean fresh? Does it mean
A
new,
fresh assessment,
revised,
new.
dated?
Fresh assessment.
Yeah, fresh assessment.
Yeah.
It's common language and common usage would be.
Yeah.
I can't see somebody, to be honest. I think it's semantics.
Well, it is semantics, but it's all semantics, that's the point.
Yeah.
I don't want to die in the dictionary, obviously, just a
No.
recommendation.
Okay.
A better word, I think, could be better.
Can we take that on? I'm sure officers have heard that, and if they come up with a better word,
Yeah. Otherwise, we keep it fresh and that's it.
yeah.
We got the message.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
He's only got a suggestion, so I mean, it's just...
No, I'm afraid I don't have just other than your remarks.
Okay. Right, Councillor Randall, do you want to speak at all? Sorry. No, okay, thank you. So that's your third recommendation, Councillor Walker?
That's the third. I am keen that Councillor Randall raised some very specifics, and I wondered whether we have those answers for her with regard to the withdrawal of the points that she raised in opening address.
Chairman, if I
Yeah.
may, the points I make in relation to Appendix B, the schemes that have been withdrawn are either schemes operated by others, not by this council, and therefore if they don't exist, it doesn't clearly make sense to describe them any longer. And where they were operated by this council, they were externally funded, and that external funding no longer exists. So it's simply a factual update in Appendix B. What Appendix C does, though, is give us a framework for providing support from our own resources for people at risk of homelessness or actually homeless.
Right.
Does that help, Councillor Randall, with regard to...
So Maria, what's that saying?
I could add that I can't remember the name of the scheme, sorry, the scheme. We've got the Daventry Homeless Prevention funding that actually does provide for rent rescue and those kinds of things. So it's not that they have gone away, it's that factually we don't have anything, called by those names. So it's a factual update, that's all. But that funding is available.
Thank you for the explanation.
I think, Chair, to be fair, that the Homelessness Act has really sort of put a lot of work on prevention, and I'm highly satisfied from discussions I've had with officers that we take that responsibility really, really seriously. And although there may appear to be some withdrawal of funds that were available, certainly this council takes it very seriously, is that we don't want people in bed and breakfast, we do not want people sleeping rough, and we're doing everything we can to ensure that people have a safe place to sleep and a roof over their head.
Thank you, Steve, Councillor Walker. Councillor Randall.
Yeah, it's just, this is very close to my heart because I know so many people that are sofa surfing, and it's just not a small number, it's a huge number. Across the country, this situation is dire, and to me, we could go further. We've got money in the reserves. I've often said before that we've got, you find someone this evening that is homeless and has got no roof over their head. Do you know where they go? Nowhere. They go nowhere. They sleep on a park bench, or they find some corner, because we haven't got a hostel or anything. The hostel's generally in Northampton if you phone them up. But sometimes you've got spaces in Wellingborough. You can't get across to Wellingborough. They've got no money. We've got no bus to get to Wellingborough. So these people are just left. And I've said many a time that it's just a shame that we haven't got any sort of hostel. We've got money in the pot. To me, we could do so much more, and we're just not. And it just saddens me when I see how many people are around this town, sleeping in cars, sleeping in corners somewhere, sofa surfing. They've got no home to call their own, and it's just not. And rents are just not affordable. Most people, there's so many people in this town. You can get a job. You can walk straight into that agency today. You can start work tomorrow. But it's on the lowest paid income, and it is certainly not enough to pay these sort of rents. So they can't. So they're working full time, and they can't afford to live anywhere. They're still sofa surfing, and it's so sad.
Thank you, Councillor Randall. Can you comment on that, Maria?
Yes, I do, Chairman. Prior to April, the council only had limited duties around homelessness if people had a priority need. Since the introduction of the Homeless Reduction Act in April 2018, we have a whole range of duties, and anybody, including those single people that we might not have had a duty before, can and should come to the council, and we will work with them on the prevention and all of the other new duties. We have invested hundreds of thousands of extra money in homelessness since the changes. Our team is twice the size. We've got more people going through the system, doing prevention activities and relieving their homelessness. So, the law has changed quite dramatically, and there is no reason for anybody to be surfing long term or sleeping on a bench or rough sleeping. There really is no need.
Thank you, Councillor Randall.
So are you saying there are homes available? Because that is the thing. My wife, what I can see is the homes just aren't available. That's why we've got so many people on a list, and that's the people that are eligible to get on that list. so many more aren't eligible to get on that list.
Maria?
Anybody who's homeless has absolute right to come to the council for support to help them into affordable, sustainable accommodation. And I would encourage you and anyone else to refer them to housing options, and we will work with them to resolve their homelessness.
I hope that's helpful, Councillor, and you can refer these people to the council.
Well, it is, but you get put on a bad scene, you're never going to get a
Oh, no,
property.
no.
You know, I've seen it, but anyway, we work.
To clarify, Chairman, I'm not talking about the housing register, I'm talking about having a range of homeless duties. And, you know, and we have a range of duties. We did provide some briefing sessions, but there is no reason for people, they can come up with us and we will help them get housing.
Okay. Pass the message on, Councillor Randall. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to point out, of course, last week at full council, we set out growth bids 180,000 in 2018-19, going up to 152,000 thereafter, and also in 65,000 for prevention in 2018-2019, going up to 75,000 per year thereafter. Only last week we had that in the papers.
Well, thanks for that confirmation in your portfolio, Councillor Morgan. That's very helpful. Back to Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. Yeah, again, it's just to reiterate, you know, Councillor Randall, I will sit down with you and talk these things. There's a lot of things said in this chamber, and some of them aren't actually accurate, and we may not be happy with what we have in place, but we do have things in place. So you just come and talk to me, give me some specifics, and I'm quite happy to work with you and represent with regard to trying to put some of these things right. But it's not just about sounding off in this chamber, it's about coming together and working together to try and solve the problems. And we have a good relationship with our officers, and we are trying our best. And you can be part of that if you want to. So please email me, we'll spend some time together, and we'll try and go through some of your concerns.
Well, thanks for that kind offer.
The final one is I would like a second amendment, and that's really with regard to a policy we have called the Housing Assistance Policy. And this is for grants and loans to bring in empty houses into use. Now this policy has been about for a while and is very rarely used. I'm a little bit anxious about just deleting it from our tool of tactics in dealing with housing issues. So what I propose that we do is that we have a consultation on whether this provision is still necessary as a resolved item. So to resolve to have it is a resolution, isn't it? To have a consultation on whether we still require to have the housing assistance policy that allows grants and loans for bringing empty houses into use. And the sense of that is that we need to be really sure that it isn't just a communication issue, that are people aware of this? So by consulting with the public and with Citizens Advice Bureau to ensure that we're not missing a trick here, but it may well be that the policy is now obsolete, bearing in mind all the other things that we are doing in this area. So a period of consultation to take it to the officers to then establish exactly whether we can delete the policy or whether we just need to promote it.
Does this relate to Appendix C or Appendix A, Councillor Morgan?
So this will be a new one on the main recommendations to add in a resolution which will be
Recommendations.
a resolution.
It's not a station, my fault.
Yeah, so it'll be a resolution. I don't know whether that would be 4 or resolution 1 because we've got 3 recommendations. But to be added to the frontage, so as a resolution to then have a consultation period to see whether we still require the housing assistance policy, and that consultation will be with public and professional statutory voluntary.
Simon.
Just for clarity, not the whole housing assistance policy, because that obviously includes the text being amended in Appendix A, which includes the matters which Councillor Gilbert referred to. It's particularly the part of the housing assistance policy that relates to grants and loans for bringing empty houses.
Okay.
That's what I was asking. Okay, do I second it for that? Councillor Guildford, any comments? Do you want to agree with that amendment? Or proposal? Any against? Okay, it's agreed.
Thank you.
Can we move to the 3 recommendations before you now? Are you happy to support them?
Agreed.
Agreed. Good.
Thank you, Chairman. You just need to note that recommendation 3 is as amended, the policy as amended. There was a...
That's the policy amended. Okay, thank you, Steve. Councillor. We move on now to economic regeneration and budget issues. Representative of the Knoll, Long March, Daventry, Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. The council owns a parcel of land known as the Knoll on the Marchester Industrial Estate. It's a vacant piece of land, overgrown, very, very steep, and with topographical difficulties in development. I can't remember how the Knoll was formed. I really cannot rack my brains. I had a job to get to sleep last night thinking about it. I can't ever remember it as a child, whether it was man up there and these various developments. I do not know.
Might have been there from time immemorial.
Well, it may well have been. Memory does play tricks on that. But of course it's a very friable subsoil. It's very difficult to deal with. Very difficult. And it's quite a stick. It's like an upturned Christmas pudding. I've been dealing with this on and off for 2 or 3 years because when I held my present portfolio, before I moved on to be vice chair and planning during my own absence, I was dealing with it then in 2015, I think. We did get planning permission for 2,700 square metres of research and development and light and general industrial use. But of course, because of the difficulties of the site, its topography, it was totally unviable. And it was unviable on several grounds. Not only the site difficulties with the soil, but creating a development plateau, extension of the road access, provision of main drainage, and structural landscaping. As an eye-watering estimate, the cost of the earthworks alone would be £1.4 million. It just wasn't viable in any way at all. I couldn't make it work. Now, in intervening years, and more recently, a proposal has come up from a company called Claymore, which says they might make it viable if you could increase the floor space of development to 6,000 or 7,000 square metres. That's 6,000 to 7,000 square metres, up from the 2,700 metres already got planning permission for. So it's nearly triple the size, yeah. And they reckon they could do it by developing the space in a terraced arrangement with access from the West March entrance of the site. It has 2 entrances, that site. So I suppose what they mean by terraces is what? Like steps. Terraces. It's very, very steep. Ruined a pair of shoes there. The proposed arrangement, what they anticipate doing, is because of the risks attached to new development, that the initial cost of development, preparing the site is such a high proportion of the total budget, they propose to and approached SEMNET for a grant from the local fund. At SEMNET, that's government funding, or our money, really, I suppose, as taxpayers at the end of the day, but it's government funding from the local growth fund. And they think it's a runner. Well, this is the tentative proposed arrangement. The Daventry District Council will grant Claymore a lease of the Knoll for 200 years. Breakable if the grant application fails, which is fair enough, or if after 3 years they're unable to obtain planning permission. I make no comment on that planning aspect. Or after 5 years, if there's been no substantial progress on site and commencement development. In all those cases, there will be no reimbursements of costs, so it's not going to cost us anything. The use of the development would be restricted to B1, B2 and B8 classes. Fair enough. There would be no rent payable by Claymore unless a benchmark was exceeded, then Daventry District Council would receive a small portion of profit, and that benchmark presumably will be calculated by selecting an appropriate rate of return. Very straightforward discounted cash flow calculation. So there's no rent unless a benchmark is exceeded. If, of course, the character of the area changes and say the knoll suddenly becomes suitable for housing development, then of course Daventry District Council would be entitled to share in any enhanced profit if the site was subsequently disposed of for housing. Now, there are two other factors here. DDC has to look at the issue of best consideration and its duty to best consideration. There has been a suggestion, a verbal suggestion from someone, that this site would be suitable for an energy waste facility. You haven't drawn your breath, but I think you're looking with horror. An energy waste facility. On that particular issue, there are two things. One, they'd have to get it past the council. Two, in particular, the planning committee. Three, they'd have to get it past local residents who would probably react just like they've reacted elsewhere. Northampton's a good example. Because of course it's within 200 metres of housing, some of it reasonable value housing too. And initial indications, although one has to look at the politics of the thing, is that the senior members of the council, and I single out portfolio holders, do not support such a proposal anyway. So there would be huge opposition to that, even if it was a realistic proposal made in writing, which it isn't. And I've no doubt the business team are well aware of people who make offers, like anyone else who's dealt with real estate, make offers and then subsequently have no intention of proceeding, and don't proceed. So there would be great difficulty in doing that. But of course it is something which we have to bear in mind when looking at best consideration. That would have to take its course. I can't anticipate what the planning authority, the planning committee will make of the proposal for an energy waste facility. But you have to bear in mind that we've been long time we've been concerned about the gateway to Daventry in the London area and how we could improve that. We wouldn't want to add to any eyesores by sticking a building that's probably going to be 35 metres high somewhere on a plateau on the knoll. I wouldn't think that would be acceptable to local residents. It certainly wouldn't be acceptable to this council. So, to a certain extent, I think we can say, that that suggestion of a possible offer of 3 million for that particular reason is highly tentative at best. So, just to confirm that the knoll is not an open space within the statutory accepted definition of it. It is a piece of waste land. It's currently very overgrown. Part of it, I think, is left on license, occupied on license. I think we've got chickens or something like that there. But that's about all it's suitable for. So it's a last-ditch attempt to try and get some sort of development on the knoll, which would increase industrial space and provide employment, jobs, and so on. It would cost us nothing make use of what is now really just, as I said, a piece of wasteland. So there you have it. Now I'd like your approval to investigate, see if that can go.
That's what you did, Councillor James. We are short of employment now, so that's a good way forward potentially. So open to members. Councillor Hills.
Yeah, I'd like to support this proposal. Ever since I first joined the council many, many years ago, the Nile every now and again rears its ugly head. We've been looking at ways how to make the best use of it over several years. I can remember going on when all the various coach tours or bus tours have been organised for councillors to go and have a look at the Nile, and we've been down there. And to me, if we can make use of this or get this into use, I think it is definitely worth supporting. So I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think Councillor James could have done a slightly better job in terms of selling the benefits. I think you summed up that way.
Yeah.
I remember actually speaking to former Councillor Chris Over about this. Obviously, we had a look at it one evening and about the benefits, etc. I think the energy power station, I think, is pretty unpalatable. But I would have thought actually that given the other developments, literally the other side of the road from there, we should at least develop it in a sympathetic manner. So anything that is developed there is actually helps to be, I'm not sure, aesthetically pleasing gateway to the town, of course, because, and I guess maybe there's options around that to explore as well. And I think in terms of the, what it was beforehand, you know, the sort of comical side, we wanted to say, you know, the glaciers actually carved out the land there, but maybe by the end of the 200-year lease, you might have discovered what was there before. I think broadly I support it. I was quite concerned when I actually read it, and I do think it needs to be, whatever's there, obviously in those classifications, will need to be done in a sympathetic manner, and obviously make the best use of the land for the benefits which you've broadly at the end outlined there.
Thank you, Councillor. The point I would make there is that we know we have a lot of demand for new employment businesses in the area. We have a shortage of business land, employment land, so there's an opportunity maybe to take advantage of that demand as part of it, not only part of it, you know, a number of sites actually put business facilities on there. But you're quite right about being sympathetic.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Chair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we have an opportunity to make it a very welcoming space,
Yes.
to have it designed well. But actually, I think really being much more. I kind of sensed a sort of. I know that's your typical relaxed style, but I think we could be much more forthright about the benefits
Yes.
of the deal and the way it is structured. I think it could be quite challenging for some members to understand how that will happen, particularly given some of the debates earlier this evening.
I'm sure it does happen. Councillor will be very happy. Also, Chris Owen now will be very happy as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, any other? Yes, Councillor Ritchie.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to ask a question.
Sure.
And the only thing that puzzles me is that if this organisation, Claymore, thinks it can make a profit out of this site, what's wrong with DDC? Does Councillor James not have the same sort of expertise or access to the same expertise so that we can make a profit ourselves?
Do you want to sign? Why
Chair.
don't DDC do it?
Chairman, it's simply about an issue about capacity. In theory, DDC could do the same thing. But this organisation has limited staffing, limited time, almost certainly, and a set of priorities that members have given officers to deliver. In the time available, we don't have the resources to take this additional project forward. So the choice essentially is let it happen with somebody else taking a fair profit for it, or not provide the additional employment land. That's what it boils down to.
Okay, thank you. Well, the key thing here is we are time limited, and the issue here is we can take decisions for this district area whilst we're in our own right, but it becomes harder when you become part of a bigger body. There's going to be a lot of demands from all over the place. Not saying it's not possible, just that it becomes more difficult. Yes.
Yeah. That is of course the case, Chair,
Yes.
but the larger body that will take our place
Yes.
may have an even greater need for making profit somewhere.
You might be right. Yes, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Which goes back to my point about selling the benefits. because basically it is a capacity constraint issue as laid out. We either do nothing,
Yes.
we do something, and we have to consider doing something now through this mechanism. Would it give us benefits in the area, either for now or future development?
Thanks, Councillor. Another comment? We go to the vote, Councillor James?
Yes, I just say I haven't been forceful in trying to sell it because of this best value, best consideration duty. I could be highly persuasive.
Normally I, Councillor James.
Yes, but it's best to look at the facts and stick just to the facts rather than paint a rosy picture. This is an extremely difficult site to do.
They've been very honest, actually, very straightforward ones, yeah. Are we going to move to the vote? Are you happy to accept the recommendation?
Agreed.
Very good, Steve. Councillor James, got a second one here. West Northamptonshire Growth Deal.
I'm going to do a little bit of looking at my sheet. As has been previously reported, and we've discussed it in council, the government has identified Oxford, Milton Keynes, the Cambridge Arm, and we, together with our partners, have in principle intend to negotiate a growth deal with government in exchange for government investment and certain flexibilities. Northamptonshire has been earmarked, if you like, as one of those counties that is likely to have to take a substantial amount of housing in future years. A continuing saga, I'm afraid. So, irrespective of whether we enter into a great deal there, we're going to have housing forced on us, additional housing, by virtue of the National Planning Policy framework. That's going to happen anyway. Our partners, of course, and this is coincidental, I suppose, Northamptonshire County Council, Northampton and South Northampton. So nice and convenient if we subsequently proceed towards being a unitary authority based on those constituent district and borough councils, excluding the county council. This is an attempt to sort of seize the initiative, if you like, with a budget coming up. It would be nice to get this in fairly soon. I'm not going to mention the budget itself. It's a matter of approaching this in two stages. Stage one and then stage two. For stage one, we would be looking for funds from government to actually do all of the preparations, identifying developments and so on. And I don't mean just ordinary housing estates, possibly developments based on the Golden Towns idea. That would be very nice. So that we can build healthy, sustainable communities. Give people a bit of garden, a bit of space, and hopefully put to bed forever and a day the sort of developments that we have seen within this county and in a little way in Daventry. Those type layouts, Southbrook, Hemingwell in Weymouth, those type of developments, which are often, more often than not, repositories for what can I use the word? Disadvantage, and of course crime too. And the Eastern District of Northampton, wouldn't want to see any of that by any means. So, healthy, sustainable developments. Some might be fairly large, some might be fairly small. It could also help bring forward stalled sites, and you could argue that we So it'll be a two-stage thing. Initially, we will be looking to government to provide us with approximately 9 million to kickstart this all, to get consultants engaged in identifying where, what and when. And then the second stage will be for the government to come up with the goodies for providing and commissioning infrastructure. We have had experience of providing infrastructure for developments in the past, albeit on a small scale, but some of these could be much more ambitious and much needed too. Daventry has long had experience of having development foisted on it without experience, as we see and read about every day in all parts of this county. So it would be nice, if we're going to have housing, to get some money up front to pay for the infrastructure too. I think we all have an agreement on that. So, appended to this report on page 41 is a growth deal for West Northamptonshire summary proposals. And I don't propose to go through all of that.
No, I said we will.
Right, okay. Well, elements of it. Acceleration of existing commitments, making better use of land in Northampton. Obviously need a helping hand there. New settlements and urban extensions on Garden town lines. There we have it. 2 stages. The outline agreement will do the first stage, where we get capacity funding. Receive capacity funding of 9 million. The second stage will be a full agreement to be agreed with government in 2019, relating to the acceleration of existing commitments and provide a clear foundation for agreeing additional commitments. The full agreement will include provision of affordable housing and infrastructure funding in order to support the growth deal. It then goes on to set out the West Northamptonshire commitments, and then it sets out the government commitments. I must stress that this is only a draft, and it hasn't been agreed by all of the partners here. And partners are Daventry, Northampton, South Northampton, Northamptonshire, Semlet and HM government. But it's a start, and that draft, I gather, has been forwarded to our partners, has it not? Yeah. Right. So there you have it. So what am I asking for? So stage 1 growth deal for West Northamptonshire along the lines given in the appendix is endorsed.
Thank you, Councillor James. I just want to say, actually, we're part of a far bigger picture, and at the moment the government and our unitary proposal going forward, we're negotiating with the government on 4 main strands, and one of those strands is the growth deal. So we see this as an opportunity in the West Northamptonshire area and the North on the other side to actually put forward a deal with government at a time when we're negotiating the way forward in terms of the unitary and maybe public sector reform in this area. So therefore there's one strand of it. So I think it's important actually we support this. I was down in Oxfordshire for a few days this week, and of course they're involved in the same area. If you think of the area from Cambridge in the east to Oxfordshire in the west, and Luton in the south to Northampton in the north, that's the size of the area, and they're talking about 1 million homes by 2051, of which many of those are already in the plans, so it's not 1 million new homes, there's still 1 million homes to build. So therefore there are great opportunities here to build sustainable communities, with the technology improving all the time. If you think about new garden cities, and you think about the digital improvements in technology, there's a real opportunity here to build something very special for new communities, and on the back of that, hopefully existing communities will also get benefits. So we're part of a bigger picture here. I just wanted to make those points. Councillor Colin Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to second this. I also saw Councillor Gilbert, and I'm not sure if
That's okay.
I wanted to make a comment.
Okay, great, thank you. I've nothing much to add actually, other than recently I changed position and now spend more time working in Cambridgeshire and quite near to the new A14.
Yeah.
And I can see that shaping up around my daily journeys, and it's quite inspirational actually. Notwithstanding the fact that it's obviously built for open countryside, I think it'll make a very interesting link and opening up those roads into Cambridge and the opportunities there. And I think when you do that regular journey down the A14, you can see the sort of benefits of a wider region that we're in. And I think some very exciting opportunities there with this, so I fully support this. And that's all really. The other thing that's going to make it, I saw the future with us there, with a potential new logo for the West Northamptonshire logo. Of course, that's not it, but it gives us some inspiration for the future. I think it's forward-looking. We need to.
Thanks, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Gilpin.
I say I do support this, but I do have a few questions and points to make. In that infrastructure is very important. To me, if we look at, I have two areas of infrastructure that I've always been promoting, and that is, transport, the buses, the rural buses, and health facilities. I realise this document is an extremely high-level document. We're not talking any detail at all, but I'm just talking principles. So, for example, 3.5, the full agreement will include provision of affordable housing and infrastructure funding. For me, when my experience is that infrastructure funding in the past, we've been more materialistic and looked at, the water and all this sort of thing. But we mustn't forget rural transport, and that must be a high priority of the infrastructure. You said earlier that this would be as a whole, so as in the past, developments or whatever, it's only been that for that specific area. But I would hope the directive is that it will benefit the district as a whole, so that those failing infrastructure elsewhere within the district can be assisted by this project. I'm sure I'll get clarification in a moment. If we look at 5.1.5, again, this refers to the NHS to ensure development proposals make the position of both councils and the local NHS better. And it says, it's given a directive there, in particular by promoting healthy lifestyles. But when you're talking about this type of growth, you're talking facilities as well. You are not going to deal with this sort of growth by promoting healthy lifestyles. So we mustn't forget that that's what it's about as well. Just an understanding, so if someone could clarify that point. Just a couple of clarifications here so that I understand. So we're talking here a new village possibly, as opposed to extending current villages. And for this to come forward, have sites already been identified? So clarification on whether we're talking new village or extension of villages. And then just a small one, so we would be participating in this additional growth. Does that impact on our housing land supply? Figure that is current. So that's just a learning point for me. So I think I've got about 5 points there.
Thank you, Joe. That's not bad. We'll come back to those in a minute. I've got some more speakers first. Councillor Lomax.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Chairman. I share some of the concerns that Councillor Guildford has already voiced in terms of infrastructure. There were three comments that I wanted to make about this, and no one would disagree that growth is inevitable, and we will continue to need appropriate housing in appropriate locations. However, the housing numbers which are quoted here do concern me. We need to have the houses, we need the economic development. However, it's only this week that we hear that the government's figures for housing are actually being challenged and certainly reduced by researchers who've taken another look at them. So that concerns me. Secondly, we don't even know what the scenery is going to look like in 3 years' time, let alone 30. So this also, I think, is a concern. There are changes which are coming not only in our own district but in the country as a whole, and we just don't know the impact of Brexit, for instance. And the last thing really is that over the last decade or couple of decades, in this district, in some of the parts of the district, and certainly in my ward, my area, we've been under significant pressure from predatory and self-seeking developers. And it just looks to me as if we could be opening the floodgates to a repetition of that over 30 years. And I just hope that there will be some way of actually restraining that sort of thing. Because Councillor Gill is absolutely right. We can't afford that. We've got to look at infrastructure in a much more sensible and logical way than just some cloudman coming along and saying, we like Amsterdam, we'll build there.
The reason, of course, why your area, like many other areas of our district, suffered because of that.
Oh, yeah.
Because we didn't have the right, we didn't have a plan in place. We have a plan in place now. And the key thing about a plan is, Councillor Lomax, of course, once you have a plan in place, you set the fact we need growth. That's the government's agenda, not ours. Housing growth is going to continue as people live longer and the population growth continues. It's therefore important to engage in a positive way to utilise that to our benefit of existing and new communities. And I think that's where we're coming from on this. You can always resist it, but the danger is you just resist it and everyone's worse off because nothing moves forward and houses will still get built on a speculative basis. So that's just, I'll let someone else come back on that one. Councillor Swift.
Yes, I would like to come back to Councillor Morgan when he was speaking of the A14.
Oh, yes.
And the A14, as it is now, is a dual carriageway, and you have the capital interchange at the end. And I do think we have to be careful to what we wish for, because the A14 are certainly open, but I don't think the A14, when it goes wrong, it goes through all our little road, rural road, and it cannot take anymore. So I think we need to think our strategy through, and the A14 might have done what it needed to do, but in the future we have to be careful of not asking too much of the A14. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. I'm grateful to Councillors Guildford and Lomax for the questions they've asked, because it strikes me that one thing that doesn't appear in the summary is anything about protecting the good things that we have, particularly in our villages and rural areas. Slightly related to that, 6.1.7, I just wonder what we have to gain here from Northampton being made a city. I've got nothing against Northampton. It's quite a nice place, even if a rather dirty one. But there's a sense in which we are, we've got to, in some ways, we've got to cooperate and do things jointly with Northampton. There's a sense, in some sense, we're in competition with Northampton. And I just wonder why it is that we are being linked in. I can fully understand why Northampton Borough might want Northampton to become a city, but why should we?
Okay, I'll come back to that one, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Morgan, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. It's simply a response, and that is, I think there were two parts to the A14. One was obviously around Catthorpe and the faster connectivity, although Catthorpe and Cold Ashby may have issues with that. But I was also thinking of the new part of it, which is being done around Cambridge itself, and runs past Huntington, etc. And if you look around Huntington, there's some quite interesting developments around there as well. And of course, the problem with Cambridge historically has been, because it's quite small in the way it operates, the house prices have been very restricted, and it's very difficult to get around there. So obviously that opens up some development, and of course the road might also offer up opportunities, particularly in Northamptonshire. in terms of encouraging work, because obviously it's a very prosperous place, lots of, a bit like going back to the issue earlier about motorsports, etc. So it's about creating that regional approach to high-tech industries, etc., which I think by having that connectivity, we could benefit from as well. Actually, so that was the kind of point I was making. Thank you.
Morgan. Councillor Charter.
Thank you, Chairman. This is obviously very interesting, and in fact, members might have guessed already that David and I virtually tossed a coin as to which one of us should introduce it, because it clearly has a lot of strategic planning in it, as well as economic development. The timing of this is very interesting for a number of reasons. The West Northamptonshire Joint Plan, the Joint Core Strategy, is due for review. So we're about to begin the review process. In fact, preliminary discussions have already begun on that. And that will include review of the housing numbers. Do we actually need to revisit those numbers? Putting that in the context of the government statement that this is part of a nominated growth area, so it's right what we've heard already. Growth of this size will happen here anyway, whether or not we decide to endorse it. If by adopting the suggested growth deal approach, we endorse it, we, as an area, would stand to benefit over the longer term to a considerable extent. If we don't, then we have much less control over what happens. It is my understanding that the idea of the growth would be supported by the introduction of new substantial developments rather than adding to existing settlements, because the infrastructure of existing settlements couldn't take it. We know that, we all know that, especially those of us who represent small rural communities. And that isn't the idea. The idea is new development, new growth, new town type growth. As to the question as to have we chosen sites for that yet, well no, we haven't. Doesn't mean to say we haven't been looking for all the blank spaces on the map of the district, but that's a different matter. Clearly that is a lot further down the line. So from the point of view of our need to review the joint strategic plan, which still exists, although we did manage to abolish the Joint Strategic Planning Committee, that ceased to exist on the 1st of January this year, after nearly 2 years of trying to kill it. It's a bit like killing a dinosaur. You not only have to kill it, you then have to persuade it to accept the fact that it's dead. We got rid of that, but we still have a joint planning board, which will discuss these things. We mustn't lose sight of the fact that in 18 months' time, we will be some kind of reformed local government structure, probably a unitary council which includes all of this area in one go. So the timing there is quite splendid. So I'm all in favour of this. I can't answer directly some of the questions which will of course occur to people, like what's in it for us? Why should we consider whether or not Northampton should be a city? I can tell you why. Because when we're a joint unitary authority, that will benefit the whole of the authority area, not just Northampton. And we may even host the Olympics, you never know. Another aspect of the timing which won't be known to people is, last week I attended a East Midlands Summit on Housing and Planning, which was actually a very interesting day. And in it we heard about the housing numbers that government is revising. We heard about I was horrified and shocked to be given the up-to-date number of outstanding planning permissions. It's 851,000, which, yes. I was also interested to learn, because I hadn't heard this before, that the entire planning process is under review. And opinions on that range from let's abolish it altogether because it gets in the way, to let's have a planning manifesto with 9 key points, which if anybody's interested in those, I can discuss them with you later, but not in this meeting. So there is a lot going on over the next 20 years. I probably won't live to see all of it, but I hope to live through some of it and to do what I can while I can to take part in these discussions and influence the outcome. This growth is coming. The best way to make sure that this growth comes where we want it, how we want it, and with what associated support for infrastructure, including health, education, recreation, transport, and all of those things, we get what is needed. The best way to do that is to cooperate with government, and the best way to show that your willingness to cooperate is to come forward with this kind of growth deal, Chairman. So I'm really, really happy to be part of it at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Chanter. Do you want any technical points we can come back on? Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I will try and answer the questions that were asked, haven't already been answered by Councillor Chapman in particular. In terms of Councillor Guildford's questions, public transport, yes, absolutely, needs to be part of what we obtain from government as part of the picture. And more generally, the whole tenor of our discussion with officials from CLG in particular, Ministry of Housing and Duties, that's what I should now call it, have been the existing communities of the district need to understand that there is benefit to them, in addition to whatever the benefit is to the incoming people. And very specifically, the examples of use of these people are not going to believe it if they're full of, they're queuing up to get to their GP. So that point is very much taken on board. In terms of new settlements, as Councillor Chatterley said, yes, highly likely. Can't rule out the expansions to existing larger towns as well, because we've got to do a proper assessment of the places, but new settlements are certainly likely. In terms of Councillor Ritchie's questions, there is in fact a very explicit reference in 616 to preserving what is good about what is in the district already. Councillor Chandler mentioned at a previous council meeting we're exploring the possibility of an area of outstanding natural beauty designation based on the previous landscape work the council has done. Clearly can't guarantee we'll achieve that, but if it's justified, it would make sense. And other designations which recognise the quality of what's here help us to preserve what's special in that. And words of the Southampton slogan. In terms of Northampton as a city, we think, for a professional judgment, that having Northampton as a city would actually be a benefit to the entire county, because there is a certain cachet about city status. Strange as the human psychology is, that means people will respond to a place differently if they're told it's a city. And if Derby can be a city, or Wolverhampton, arguably, there's nothing to stop Northampton being one as well. It also should be helpful in terms of getting higher value economic investment and better use of land in Northampton, which of course then reduces the demand for land outside the urban area. So for all those reasons, I think it is acting in the interest of this district, as well as the other districts in the county, as well as the borough, to achieve that. I think that covers all the questions that I've forgotten. I'm sure members will.
Thank you, Dean. So I just want to add Colin Morgan's point about Cambridge. I mean, Oxford actually is even higher value in terms of house prices. And they are suffering from the effects of Oxford City. They're actually having their growth get into the rural areas or the district areas around Oxford. A bit like Northampton actually, in our district in South Northampton. So those pressures have been felt. And Northampton town actually has a great opportunity to become a city status. Remember Northampton town was the first university town, and then Oxford and Cambridge came later. This is going back to the 1200s. So had Northampton been the Oxford or the Cambridge, we might have had a totally different area here now, because actually the university do bring a lot of money to them. Those two universities in particular bring a lot of life sciences and those sort of industries, which are very high value and very high value jobs. And obviously that's what we're trying to attract in our area. So I would see there's some real benefits there. And I think with the new unities formed, then hopefully also we can take advantage of that. The other point I also make is about the NHS, funny enough, in Oxford. The NHS in Oxford now recognise, like we're trying to do here, the benefits of getting involved in the growth agenda so they can get that benefit for themselves and facilities and other areas of their operation out of the growth agenda, which they've been missing up to this point in many areas. So, yes, Councillor Guildford.
Just two things. I remember when Northampton were unsuccessful in getting the city status.
Yes, that's
They
right, yeah,
have
yeah.
applied previously,
Yeah.
and I remember from the consultation, the residents were quite disappointed at the time. I'm not going to say how many years ago that was. But yes, as I said, I fully support this, just needed clarification.
Okay.
But there's one point, does it impact on the housing supply figure as it stands now?
Jerry,
How does
I
that
did get
work?
one, and you have reminded me, so thank you. What we are asking for, and Oxfordshire has essentially secured this, is a reduction in what we're required to have as a housing land supply, so only 3 years rather than 5. So that's an immediate help, because actually without that, the new unitary is at risk of falling into the presumption in favour of sustainable development, even without a good deal, because of the difficulty of delivering housing in Northampton currently. So the 3-year supply as opposed to 5 year will help us. We will also be arguing for, now clearly we don't know how this will go in negotiation, that our target should be based on our local need figure, not on the higher number that we're using in the plan. So a combination of measures to try and make sure that we retain control. That's part of the quid pro quo with government. We will help you deliver more houses and associated development, but you in turn must help us make sure that development is controlled and managed in a way that's acceptable to local communities.
Thank you. In Oxfordshire, actually, some very interesting schemes about providing affordable provision, where instead of the normal 20% discounts to the market, there's a 40% discount. But bearing in mind that house prices are very high, so I think that's another benefit. But also, you're quite right, Simon, it's a 3-year land supply there, not a 5-year land supply, and that's worth fighting for. Councillor James.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I know it's been discussed, but I think I'll add two. Northampton being a city. Of course, Northampton was once the capital of England. And schoolboys in Northampton were told, well, we are really a city because we've got a cathedral, you know, it's a Roman Catholic cathedral, but it's a cathedral nevertheless. But I think one of the advantages of giving Northampton city status is that now it is so big, and it does have a significant element of deprivation. Deprivation, that's the word I was looking for when I got lost in the previous presentation. It has a significant level of deprivation. It also has this unique history of the boot and shoe industry attached to it, and manufacturing high quality, very high quality boot and shoes, and together with the surrounding countryside, it could well be a suitable candidate for a city of culture, just like Hull and Liverpool were.
Glasgow.
Then you get some money.
Glasgow.
Yeah, you could deal with the town centre in
Okay, I want to prolong the debate particularly, yes, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. No, I don't want to prolong it either, but it's a good point actually, isn't it, about a city of culture? Because of course Coventry is going to be a city of culture.
It is, yes.
And who'd have thought that many years ago as well? And another point, going back to university, Chris, of course, Chair, sorry, is the new university campus there has been very highly regarded.
Yes.
And I think this actual document and also the discussions we're having this evening, I think is really needs to be the start of us breaking down perhaps those barriers between us and starting to think as literally as one area and actually singing the praises of each other, and particularly some of those recent developments in Northampton, as we'll also be part of the same area, of course.
We will be, yeah. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Councillor
And City of Culture, I like that. Never know.
Can we move to the recommendation? Are we happy to agree?
Agree.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. We move on now to the conservation area, Pittsford, Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think this will take us very long. It is very familiar territory to all members. We do have this statutory obligation to review and revise conservation areas. Pittsford has been a conservation area since 1990. It's due for review. Again, we've got, for those who bothered to read it, a very good report from the staff concerned. Congratulations to them, particularly to Rian, who has done an excellent job in making this happen. We've got a conservation area designation proposal and management plan proposal, and the mention of Article 4 directions, which will no doubt eventually come about. And all I'm asking for this evening, Chairman, is for a resolution that this document go out for consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Councillor Chandler, are you happy to agree with that?
Agree.
Mr. Dean, thank you. There's no urgent business. That concludes this evening's meeting.